Open Secrets is petitioning the National Prosecuting Authority to prosecute a South African man for allegedly aiding and abetting the Rwandan genocide. In its report titled Open Secrets alleges that in 1994, in the middle of the genocide, the man facilitated an arms deal on behalf of one of the architects of the Rwandan genocide. For more on this, we are joined by Mamello Mosiana, who's the head of campaigns at Open Secrets. Mamello, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon. Firstly, can you provide an overview of this petition to the NPA regarding the said person's alleged involvement in the Rwandan genocide?
Hi, Nhlanhla. Thank you for having me. So we have submitted a petition to the NPA, a criminal complaint, for them to investigate and possibly prosecute Ellis for involvement and aiding and abetting the Rwandan genocide. Ellis facilitated an arms deal for a cache of arms to be transported from the Seychelles through to Goma in the DRC, where they got their end-user certificate over the border to Rwanda in Gisenyi, where we believe that in June 1994, they were used for the commissioning of the Rwandan genocide. Ellis used his connections both in the Seychelles and in Zaire to make this arms deal. And we believe he should be prosecuted for that because his actions resulted in the death of thousands in Rwanda.
Let's expand a bit more on some of the key findings of the Open Secrets investigative report titled The Secretary. What other findings did you find here?
In particular, the arms deal was a very, has been described as a greedy and cynical deal because of the circuitous way in which it made its way to Rwanda. So initially, the arms were from Serbia, which was under arms embargo at the time because of the war happening in the former Yugoslavia then. They were transported from Serbia through Montenegro to the Seychelles, where they were intercepted because they were initially destined for Somalia. They were intercepted because Somalia itself was also under an arms embargo, and that because that was in violation of that UN sanction, they were held in the Seychelles. And the Seychelles at first tried to destroy the arms with the help of the US government. Unfortunately, that was unsuccessful. But in 1994, through their connections with Ellis, they actually happened to find a way to sell the arms to Rwanda, which was also under arms embargo because by May 1994, the world was learning what was happening in Rwanda and was growingly seeing it as a genocide.
But what specific actions did this individual take that Open Secrets believes actually constitutes to aiding and abetting the Rwandan genocide?
So Ellis, this arms deal was facilitated by Ellis, firstly in South Africa. Tionest Bagasora, who was one of the main architects of the Rwandan genocide, flew from Rwanda in May 1994 to South Africa looking for countries or individuals that were willing to sell weapons to Rwanda, circumventing the arms sanctions that Rwanda was under at the time. Bagasora was put into contact with Ellis, who had been known at the time as someone who was connected with the apartheid military and the apartheid arms money machine, as Ellis at the time had been an arms dealer in the Seychelles, but also was a former secretary of the apartheid president P.W. Botha. Ellis, at the time, when he met with Bagasora in Johannesburg in 1994, put him in contact with his own contacts in the Seychelles, which went as high up as President Rene of the Seychelles. Ellis himself, in our interview with him, confirmed that he was quite close with that president and considered himself to be doing a favor for the president of the Seychelles by helping him get rid of these arms, which were now becoming a burden on the government of the Seychelles because they'd intercepted them a year earlier and they'd had to be transferred. So Ellis helped connect Bagasora, who was in South Africa, to procure these arms with the government of the Seychelles, and actually helped fly to the Seychelles with Tionest Bagasora to procure the arms. So the arms were delivered in three rounds, and Ellis was there for that transaction. Not only that, Ellis would have known at some point, we believe that he should have known at some point that the end destination of the arms was Rwanda, because one of the people who'd put him in touch with Bagasora was arrested in Johannesburg in 1994 because he was trying to deposit checks to Ellis, travelers' checks, which were from the Rwandan government. And that was stopped because the Rwandan government was, again, under an arms embargo. What ended up happening is that Ellis was paid by the Rwandan government through its BNP Paribas account into his own account, a Swiss banking account, UBP. So Ellis would have known at the time that his payment was coming from the Rwandan government and not Zaire, as he alleges. And that's why we believe that he should be prosecuted for aiding and abetting the genocide.
I quite appreciate that context or background, Mamello, but what evidence does Open Secrets have to really support the allegations made against this individual? And how does it satisfy the elements of offenses under international law?
Firstly, we have TNS Bagasora himself, who confirms that Ellis was his accomplice. Bagasora was prosecuted for crimes against humanity and genocide and imprisoned after a trial at the ICTR. Then we have the testimonies of witnesses and witness accounts made in Bisesero, which confirm that arms matching those that were part of this cache of arms from the Seychelles were used in Rwanda. And then we have several commissions of inquiry by the UN, first by Human Rights Watch, and then a commission of inquiry in 1996, which actually requested that the South African government investigate Ellis, named him specifically as one of the players in facilitating this arms deal, and asked that the South African government investigate and possibly prosecute him. This was in 1996. Over 28 years later, South African government has still not done anything about this, even though at the time, Alfred Nzo responded to the Rwandan Commission of Inquiry to say that they can confirm that Ellis was involved in this arms deal. So the South African government did have knowledge of the fact that Ellis was one of the players involved in facilitating this arms deal. And despite multiple commissions of inquiry, despite the UN, despite the ICTR, writing many times that Ellis was one of the players in this arms deal, there has been no concrete action to prosecute Ellis.
While we try to understand all this information, how did the individual's actions violate the United Nations arms embargo, especially or specifically on Rwanda during this genocide?
In particular, they violated the arms in that the end user certificate was fraudulent. The end user indicated that it would be the arms were going to Zaire, or what is known as present-day DRC. But in fact, the arms weren't going to the DRC. They were going to Rwanda. So the end user should have been listed as Rwanda. And had the user been listed as Rwanda, then the sale should not just have happened, because an arms embargo means that sales from or to that country were banned at the time. That's what the embargo stipulated. So any deal made to transport arms or sell arms to Rwanda was in fact in violation of that arms embargo. So even the fact that the bank involved in this, the French bank BNP Paribas, paid Ellis on behalf of the Rwandan government is in itself a violation of that arms embargo.
So in what ways did the arms shipments facilitated by this person exacerbate the violence and loss of life during the Rwandan genocide?
So we, in our investigation, we looked at the kinds of arms that were sold. So we saw that there were mortars, AK-47s, grenades, and we investigated where could have been the possible places where this was used. And we looked through the testimonies at the ICTR, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. And what we found in particular was a 2006 case against one of the perpetrators of the Rwandan genocide, Edward Karemera, and Anatole Nsengiyumva, who's also one of the accomplices of TNS Bagasora. And in their evidence presented at their trials. There are several letters and witness accounts, and in particular a letter that speaks of an arms cache that would have been arriving from Goma through to Gisenyi in Rwanda, and was possibly used in attacks carried out from June 20, when the arms would have already arrived, because the first cache arrived on June 18th in 1994. And they were likely used in attacks in a place called Bisesero. There are hills in Rwanda where many people at the time were taking refuge. It was closer to the border, and there was a massacre conducted in Bisesero at that time, which claimed the lives of over 1,000 people. And this was one of the last very desperate acts of the perpetrators of the Rwandan genocide, because at the time they were seeing that they were losing the war against the RPF. Many of them were making their flight across the DRC border away. And during that flight away from Rwanda, they were actually carrying out more acts of genocide. And we speculate, and our investigation shows that the arms may have been used in Bisesero, and we really hope the NPA can use its powers to investigate and mutual legal assistance to really investigate what happened in Bisesero and whether these arms could have been used there.
In extension to that, Mamello, why is it so important to hold individuals like the mentioned person accountable for their actions during conflicts and genocides?
Well, number one, we hope that it acts as a deterrent, because we have seen that for Ellis in particular, this wasn't his last stop in facilitating perhaps very dubious deal. He went on then to sell parts for military aircraft to Colombia, and then also to sell gunboats to Iran afterwards. And had he perhaps been held accountable for what he'd done in 1996, when the UN Commission of Inquiry requested that the South African government investigate, perhaps he would not have gone on to further commit or participate in deals like this that are legally dubious. And then there's also the moral duty that we have to the victims of the Rwandan genocide. Many of the survivors of the genocide are still around to this day. They still have to deal with the trauma of that. And justice is one of the many ways in which we can make sure that we do that. And then thirdly, I think it's just important that South Africa shows its commitment to international customary law. I think at present we've shown ourselves to be a leader in our ICJ case against Israel, hoping to prevent genocide in Palestine. And it's really important that South Africa continues to take steps not only to prevent genocide from happening now, but to also atone and account for perhaps our own role or the role of our citizens in acts such as these, to show that this is something that we believe shouldn't ever happen again.
Now, Mamello, to make a note, we are going to attempt to reach out to this Mr. Ellis to get his right of reply. But as things stand, as open secrets, have you heard from the man, or has he responded to some of these allegations being made?
Yes, so we actually spoke to Ellis himself in 2022, late in 2022. We interviewed him. We sat down with him for over 4 hours and spoke to him at length about his life, his work working for PW Porter, his work when he was stationed in France, and then had him really explain what his view of what he believes happened in 1994 during the commissioning of this arms sale.
Did he admit to any of the allegations being made?
Sorry?
Did he admit to any of the allegations or claims being made against him?
He admitted to some of the details. So he admits that he traveled to the Seychelles, that he participated in this arms deal, but he sees it as something he claimed in his conversation with us. He used the words, "I was doing a favor for a friend," and the friend being President Rene of the Seychelles. And then he also says that he did not know that the arms were actually destined for Rwanda. For him, he was making an arms sale for the DRC, or Zaire, as it was known at the time.
And as we wrap up our conversation, perhaps remind us of the steps that, as open secrets, you expect from the NPA to take following the submission of the memorandum, and what challenges might they face in actually pursuing this case?
So we've submitted the memorandum to them on the 20th of June. We still have not received an acknowledgement that they've received it. And we also, when we submitted our memorandum, we said to them, we have all these documents that we've compiled as part of our investigative work and our legal work on this case. So please do reach out to us for us to be able to transfer these to you. So we hope that they respond and acknowledge that we have sent this request to them, and that they then undertake to receive the documents from us, which we are very willing to provide. And then we hope that they would then start reaching out to the ICTR, to the UN Commission of Inquiry, to Human Rights Watch, which had also all made recommendations or named Ellis as being part of this deal. And then possibly to the Rwandan government and Rwandan prosecutors, and to the ICTR residual mechanism that still undertakes cases related to the Rwandan genocide, to really see what could be done to further investigate and prosecute this case. One of, obviously, the very key difficulty that they may face is that this case is that old. It's 30 years since the genocide. Getting witness accounts, reliable witness accounts right now may prove difficult. And whether there is a political appetite, both in South Africa and Rwanda, is something we are finding hard to gauge. So there are possible challenges with evidence. And also there's the one very, I guess, clear issues that Ellis himself is old. He's over 80 years old now. And whether they would be able to prosecute him in time is one of the things that could be a challenge if they have to first undertake an investigation and eventually initiate a case.
Thanks to our guest. That's Mamello Mosiana. She's from Open Secrets and is the head of campaigns at the organization, really shedding light on this important issue and also speaking on efforts to hold this person, said Mr. Ellis, accountable